Today I'm gonna do a quick demo just to show some of these basic drawing techniques that you can use with this sort of soft, airy style drawing with Conte crayons. First, let's talk about materials. Here is the drawing sketchbook that I'm using. This is the Canson Mixed Media XL, and this is 98 pounds, 9 by 12 inches. So this is a pretty sturdy paper. I really like it. I highly recommend it. Then I've got a Conte crayon. This is from Conte Paris, and this is just a black crayon, but usually I buy it in a package like this, so it's a 2-pack, and then you can select exactly the color that you want. So just to be aware of that, you can buy them in 2-packs like this, and then you get exactly what you want. Then we have the kneaded eraser. So this is what's actually going to create the light. I'm going to use this to go into the paper, and that way we don't have to use any other crayons. So it's just going to be the black crayon, the kneaded eraser, and the final sort of tool here is toilet paper. So I'll show you what that's all about. There's one more sort of tool that you need, which is just sandpaper. I use 120 grit sandpaper, and this is only for this first part here, which I'm gonna just get right into. Toning the paper is very important. So I'm gonna use my sandpaper and my black Conte, and I'm just gonna go over the paper, get it all covered with this nice dust, and this is going to create a mid-tone base for us to work with. It's going to make it a lot easier to fill in all of the values and get the whole paper covered, so that way we don't have to worry about trying to draw over the entire paper if we want to make, you know, a dark drawing, or if you want that high contrast. So this is really helpful. It also makes it go a lot quicker because you can just quickly move into your highlights and your shadows since the midtones are all filled in. So basically I'm just making sure I get a pretty good dusting over the entire paper. I want to get it somewhat even here, because now once I come back over this with the toilet paper, I'm going to be spreading it out. If your toilet paper starts to get like some little wrinkles in it, or starts to get some holes, then you can just, you know, switch to a new piece. And you see now I'm left with some uneven kind of drag where the toilet paper was pulled through. You see these lines here, you see it through here, these little white areas. So in these areas, I'm just going to go again with my Conte. I'm going to sand over and make sure we're just getting a nice even covering of the whole paper. So you just go right back on top. I will warn you that this is a dirty business, so be prepared for the dust. So that's a much better coverage. You can see it's much more even. We don't really have so many clear lines or streaks, especially in this central area. You want it to be pretty even. There might be a little bit of, you know, slightly darker or lighter splotches, and that's usually not a problem. You want to get it as smooth as possible, but you also don't want to rub into the paper too much, because you're starting to take away from what you can do once you start working. The main thing I want to demonstrate here is just some technique and approach when it comes to drawing with the Conte. The first thing we have is the actual crayon itself, right? You can make marks with this. So I'll just show you down here. You know, this is what it looks like when I'm going over the paper. It's not significantly darker than what we have as our sort of base, but I can easily darken this up if I press harder and if I start doing some hatching, cross hatching, going in multiple directions. So that is one way to get towards your darkest value, is to actually just make sure you're filling in all of the space. And the way to do that is to do many different directions with your marks. So you have, straight across, you can go diagonal in either direction, vertical, and you can start breaking it up, and that way you make sure you're actually filling in all of the paper. You will probably be tempted to make a lot of lines and really like dig into the paper, because you might find, you can see I'm dragging across the paper here, and it doesn't seem like a lot is happening. It doesn't seem, you might not even be able to see it on the camera, but I'm actually making lines, and I can see them from where I'm sitting, and that's what really matters. So the first kind of line that I think you should really be aware of and even master, this should be your go-to, is a very faint, almost non-existent kind of line. So the way to do this is you're going to just hold this very gently in your hand, and you're just going to let it drag across the surface. See this? So I'm not pressing in, I'm just kind of dragging it. So it's very, very superficial. And the reason that is important is because in these early stages, you want to be able to measure things out. You want to be able to, start playing around. Okay, where can I fit in these different components? You're not working from a photo here. You're working from life. So you don't have that luxury of just putting it side by side or whatever. You gotta kind of play around a little bit. You gotta measure out. You gotta start to figure out how these different parts are actually gonna fit together. And so right now I've already got, a lot of the structure here of this self-portrait, and you probably can't even see it. You probably can't even see it. So that is why these faint lines are so fantastic. You're able to put them into place, and you're able to almost give yourself a map or a guide without it being permanent. That's the key. It's not permanent. It's very, very subtle. It's almost like a secret little indication just for yourself. So in my view, that's the single most valuable, and that's what you should be using for a very large amount of time, because that's how you're going to kind of get everything in place, give yourself the structure, and once you've got it pretty much figured out, I mean, once you're already into the stage of, getting highlights and getting more specific with where you're placing these kind of dark marks, then you're good to go. You're not worried anymore about trying to figure out the proportions. Then you're working more so on effects. But if you are too harsh and you're digging into the paper from the very beginning, you're going to have nowhere to go. You're going to make all these permanent marks. You're not going to be able to remove them. And then you're just going to be screwed. I mean, you're going to have to work so hard just to get the slightest change in terms of effect. And it's going to be a nightmare. So I've run into that. I'll tell you. I know this from first-hand experience, that digging into the paper, making really dark marks in the early stages is a bad idea. So when I talk about structure, I talk about form, all of these things, what I'm really talking about is what is this kind of underlying skull, what is the constant that you can find pretty much in all portraits. So where do the eyes, nose, mouth, where do they fall relative to these bigger shapes, and what does the most simplified version of likeness look like? So that's essentially what I'm concerned with. I talk about this in many videos, but in case you're unaware, essentially I'm going to just draw out this kind of egg shape for the whole head. I'll look for where to place the eyes as a starter, or the eye socket, because that's going to be a very definitive marker. It's going to be about halfway down the head where you find the eyes, and then you can start to break things down and simplify from there. So then I can place the length of the nose, and I can figure out approximately where the length of the nose is going to be. And then from there, I can get some of this mouth jaw area. Typically I'm going to simplify this, so I've already done it really, but right in here I've got this kind of shape where I'm going to draw a sort of oval or circle, and that encompasses the mouth. If you look at a skull, the skull actually protrudes completely in that area, so that's the reasoning behind making that shape. I also have a beard, so it's just very natural. I mean, it's gonna work out just fine. The next kind of mark that I want to introduce is using the kneaded eraser. And the kneaded eraser is very useful because you can be delicate or you can be sharp. You can mold it to fit your needs. So if I want to very delicately go in here, I can get something small like this. I can bring it out to a point, and I can just drag it very, very softly across the surface. And so you see now, I'm not really making big changes here. So this is going to allow me to just kind of shade the area however I want. You can also kind of fold this out into a more broad shape. So you can pull on it in order to get things moving, get it kind of warmed up. That usually helps. And now I can cover a very broad area if I want to. So I can go like this and really cover a broad area. That was maybe not the best example. You have to get it smooth. That's the key. So you gotta work it in your hands a lot, and then you'll get a very broad kind of block. You almost want to turn it into a squared edge. But if you let's say you make a mistake like that, that's a good time to bring up the toilet paper. So I can bring in my toilet paper here. Notice I'm choosing this side here. It doesn't have the Conte on it. It's the clean side. I can just smooth this out. So not a big issue. The toilet paper can also be used to lighten areas. So as you just saw, this kind of softened up, but I can actually use this to remove some of this dust in a very gentle way. The other thing that the toilet paper is great for is blending. So let's say I've got some harsh lines. I can show you. These are not actually not digging into the surface. These are light lines, but I'm going to do them in a kind of hatching form here to get some increased darkness. So this is the other technique with the Conte crayon. You can actually use it to shade broad areas while still working pretty softly. So I'm just going in here as I almost was with the outline. I'm going pretty soft, and I can just cover some of this up just like that. And I'm using the hatching, so I'm going in a kind of diagonal direction. That seems to work well with the Conte. So don't do squigglies, don't do things that are going to appear very disturbing. You generally want to either make a line if it has a purpose, so I'm going to go like this and pull in a direct way with intention. And that's actually pretty rare. I wouldn't recommend doing that too much, or else I'm going to be just shading an area, and that's going to be diagonal most of the time. I can cross hatch if I need to make it darker. So it's either going this way or it's going this way. And you see I'm making individual marks. I'm not sitting here like going like this, right? That's horrible. That's a nightmare. So don't do that. Don't do that. That is a disaster. So if I have my toilet paper, I can choose, different levels here, let's say. If it's more dusty like this, I can drag that around and maybe even make an area darker if it's pretty light. Or I can choose a cleaner area. That's going to give you a more smooth blend. So anytime I'm pulling across the face, usually I want to have a relatively cleaner area just so I know what I'm going to get. But for this area up here, you can decide what you want to do. But this is what it looks like if you go over top of that hatching. You see that? So it just softens it up. It kind of makes it non-existent. You don't really see it so much anymore. And then I could decide if I want to come back and I want to either add a little bit more shadow, or perhaps I want to add a little bit of a line here or there. That's kind of up to you and what really is dictated by the drawing or the subject, I would say. So the main ways that you're going to find form, and you're going to actually bring out the sort of essence, the substance here, is through your highlights and your shadows. And we've got all these beautiful mid-tones covered. So most of these areas, I'm not too concerned about. I'm not really looking around. I'm not really searching for much here. What I'm really looking for are the very definitive highlights and shadows. So in a few crucial areas, they're always gonna be standing out. You've got the forehead. Now granted, this is with Rembrandt lighting. If you're not familiar with Rembrandt lighting, I'm gonna make sure I cover it. So it's basically a harsh light that's coming from the side. It's direct lighting. It just means that there's a high amount of contrast. You have clear markers like your highlights that are gonna fall more so on the left side, and then shadows are going to fall more so on the right side. So it's going to be like this harsh light coming across the face. So those highlights are going to really tell you a lot about the shape, about what you need to do in order to get to the likeness and the structure and actually reflect your model. So I'm looking here. This is going to be a good spot. I'm always going to look at the eye socket. You see here, we're going to get a sort of highlight on the nose. This is going to be either, kind of on the side here, or it's going to be going the length of the nose. It could be both, but you're going to get highlight there. You're going to get a pretty definitive highlight over here as well. This is the zygomatic bone. It's very, very important. This is always going to help us to figure out the proportions and to shape the face. So right over here, see this, and then we're going to get the shape of the eye socket. So maybe I should exaggerate this a little bit, but you kind of already see it. Right in here, through these highlights, through the shadow on the inner part of the eye socket, as well as the eyebrow up here. That's going to help to show us where the actual eye socket is. And then you're going to get some other markers like right here under the nose. Doesn't need to be very defined, but you're going to get just a little bit of light here, because remember how I said this part is protruding, this part's coming towards us. Right in here where we have the teeth underneath there, we have the jaw. So that's usually going to be a pretty definitive marker, as well as shadows, of course. So I can just hatch a little bit under here, under the nose. Just to be clear, when I'm talking about hatching, this is what I was doing up here. I'm not really making harsh marks, even still. Going pretty delicate, and I'm making singular marks. So that way I'm not leaving behind those ugly squigglies that I mentioned before. So you can still go very, very delicate, and I'm just kind of letting things progress and develop as they come. I'm not not pushing too hard here to try to achieve something or to do too much, right? If you just look for the structure and you look for these very broad shapes, then it will come without much effort. You know, you don't have to start outlining things or doing too much. So another technique, a way that you can create light or blend, is to use your fingers. So your fingers are a great tool. So I can pull here. You see how this is taking out some of that shadow. It's creating a little bit of light there. And so that is a way that you can remove some of this dusty Conte, or alternatively, you can also use it to blend. So if I find that there's an area where I've got, let's say, too much darkness or an uneven kind of blending, I can smooth it out and pull some things together using my finger. The finger is also good if you want to add darkness. So let's say, I'll just put some down here, but you could pull from your sandpaper, or you could pull from a very dark area like this right here, and you can just rub your finger around there. Now you've got it on your finger, and you can pull that back into the drawing. So that can be a good way to make some very subtle marks. So still, to be clear, I'm not doing a whole lot of looking at myself for likeness. I'm mostly just looking at what is the structure telling me, where's the eye socket, where's the cheekbone, and I'm going based off of, you know, some of these clear indicators, which are going to be consistent across all models. So the first things you want to look for are the highlights and the shadows. The midtones are filled in, so that really does a lot of work for you. Then you're just going to be able to fill in the highlights and shadows, and that will give you a pretty substantial amount of form. Then there's not so much left to do, but to kind of, you know, you want to tweak your proportions, figure out how you can maybe idealize the model, maybe do a little bit of extra work there to bring out some of their better qualities, and perhaps hide anything which is very unflattering. And the main task after you get those proportions is just trying to, you know, make a beautiful drawing. So if you want to make a really bright highlight, what you can do is you can take your knead eraser and get yourself like a really good stump, and then you're just going to pull into the paper very hard. And so that's also how you can make some more like blocky type of marks if you want to create some kind of block like that. Creates a kind of broader, bigger mark. So that's a good way to make like your brightest highlight. This right here would be my 1 value right here. And the process, this drawing process, is essentially just going to be, you know, you go through, you draw everything you can. I'm going to basically just mark out my highlights, my shadows. Maybe I'll do a little bit of blending here or there if it's necessary, but that's mainly, I would say if there's like a mistake, probably. Otherwise, I'm just kind of looking at these broad forms and just trying to block out, you know, those main indicators, which I pointed out, like the the things that are really going to define the face. What is it doing in these crucial areas? And once you get to a point where there's not really so much left to do, let's say you've kind of gone through, you've marked off everything, and you're wondering, okay, how can I improve this now? Or maybe you just want to get rid of some lines. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe you've got some lines all around that are just bothering you. Like, maybe I don't like these lines. Maybe I want to soften up the eye a little bit. So this is where you can take the toilet paper, and this is one of these beautiful effects of this kind of style or this method. You can take this and you can just drag across the whole surface, just like this. And so that will just soften everything up. You will get some blending, and it's kind of a more subtle way to create a kind of atmospheric quality or to soften things. I can also go in specific areas, like right here in the eye. I want to soften that up just a little bit. One more mark for you here is actually creating lines. So typically you want to be cautious with this, I would say. You want to consider it before you just go around placing lines, because you can make a really, really beautiful drawing pretty much without any lines. You don't really need to create a bunch of lines. It's not very necessary. However, it can be something that kind of adds to the quality, because it can contrast with this sort of soft, airy style and give you a kind of contrast of style, so to speak. It's like a break in the matrix. You've been doing all this soft, fuzzy, smooth blending, and then in some crucial areas you can create a more definitive line. So the places where I would recommend are generally going to be in the focus, in high contrast areas like the nose or the mouth, the eyes, or something that's going to help to kind of define this overall form. So I'd recommend studying Nerdrum. He's the master, and he's got a really beautiful approach to kind of making these subtle lines and playing around with the ways that he's making them. But basically it's just to dig more into the paper, or to press harder, like right here. I can create the nostril, and it's usually, like I said, kind of a riskier move, because it can be harder to get that back out, especially if you're making it very dark. You can get into some serious trouble because it's difficult to get it back out. Once you go back over it, you might not be able to get back to what you had. So just a little bit of warning there. But yes, you can also create lines using your kneaded eraser. So if you want to draw a line like I just did there with the eyelid, you can kind of draw using the kneaded eraser. Right here we can draw the ear, something like that. That's basically all of the marks and techniques that I can think of. Those are absolutely essential. As I said, really try to stay softer. I know that might be difficult, but if you focus on creating the form by putting together the light and shadow, you're going to have a much easier time compared to what might feel like a more natural approach is to really just use your Conte crayon and try to draw everything, right? Try to draw lines and almost outline everything, but it's not going to work so well. And that's what I think this really emphasizes when you're drawing with this style, when you're working with these materials. It kind of forces you to take a more three-dimensional approach. It forces you to think about how things are round, how you're going to get something to stand out or to create that volume when you can't just draw lines everywhere, right? So that's part of the reason I think that it's really great practice. In my view, it is the closest you can get to painting, and it's just a really great exercise for trying to understand form, volume, really all of the foundations for painting. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.